this is Joe from Scarecrow Joe's Studio. Welcome back. This is part 4, the final part of our paper mache killer clown jack-o'-lantern tutorial. In this segment, we are going to primer, paint, and seal our sculptures. So let's get to it. Alright, before we begin, let's go over tools and materials needed to complete our sculptures. Obviously, first thing you're going to need is your sculpture. And then you're going to need some primer. I'm going to primer the inside as well as the outside of my sculpture. Easiest way to do that is to get a spray can of primer. This is a flat white. It's a paint and primer combination. Or you can, of course, use a small sample. This is just a small sample of paint and primer. This is a big sculpture, so I'm going to use the spray can. Or if you have a big can of primer, you can go ahead and use that as well. But I do suggest using this, especially for the inside, because getting in there with a paintbrush with primer is going to be very difficult. And along those lines, it's a good idea, if you're using the primer, to wear a pair of gloves. Disposable gloves will work. I have these work gloves here that I use a lot, because once primer gets on your hands, it's very difficult to get off. And then you're going to need some various paint. Whatever paint color scheme that you want to use to paint your jack-o'-lantern, go ahead and choose those paints. You're going to need some paint brushes. And then after we primer the inside of the jack-o'-lantern, what I'm going to do is, after it dries, I'm going to go inside and I'm going to spray paint the inside of it a nice orange color. After we primer and paint it, we're going to want to seal the sculpture. It'll protect it from any kind of moisture, and the primer is also going to help protect it from any moisture as well. But you do want to seal it, and I recommend getting a clear satin polyurethane. This happens to be Minwax, but you can use any clear satin or matte finish. That way it doesn't look so glossy. Unless, of course, you want your jack-o'-lantern to look glossy, then get a gloss. Alright, the other thing that you're going to want to do is, if you're using the spray paint, you're going to want to do that in a well-ventilated area. So I'm going to go ahead right now and take this guy upstairs on my outdoor deck and do the primer inside and out. So I primered the inside, the outside, and I didn't shoot video on the inside of it, but I did go in and I spray painted the inside of it orange. I didn't feel the need to show you that. It's not rocket science, pretty easy. But as you can tell, in the process of spray painting the inside of it orange, I got spray paint on the outside of it, and on the bottom as well a little bit. I'm not very concerned about the bottom because nobody's really going to see it. But the first thing that I'm going to do is I'm going to go in and clean up these areas, especially around here, with some white primer. Just want to cover this up a bit, especially the teeth. I am going to paint the teeth, but I don't want that garish orange color to predominantly stand out on them. The other thing that I'm going to do is the areas that I know I want to be white, a white clown face. I'm just going to go in with my, and again, this is a paint, this is a satin enamel stain blocking paint and primer in one. And that'll just go in and smooth it out a little bit more with this paint. This isn't the smoothest sculpting job I've ever done in my life, I can tell you that. What I really should have done is taken the time to take a fine grain, or not a fine grain, but a medium grain sandpaper and sand over some of the rougher areas. But I didn't do that before I primered it, so it is what it is. Not a big deal. He's just going to be a little rougher than what I really wanted. As I'm doing this, I am still thinking about my color scheme for him. I usually do the standard clown type thing with the red nose, which I'm still gonna do with the red nose for sure, and red mouth, like a darker red mouth. I have this color right here. This is a spiced berry color, so it's a darker red for the mouth, in the cheek areas that I know that I'm gonna go with. But as far as the eyes, I usually go with a lighter color blue like this. But I'm thinking I might do a darker blue, such as a navy blue, or even a green. So I'm still trying to decide. All right, now that I have that covered up better, I'm going to let that dry, and then I'm going to start the painting process. That is all dry. I don't know if you could tell the difference here. Between just the primer that I use, the flat primer, and then the paint and primer combination. So I think what I'm going to start on first is I'm going to do the eyes. And again, wasn't quite sure what I wanted to do as far as the color, but I'm going to go with this dark navy blue. And if I don't like it, that's all right, because I can always paint over it with the white primer again and do something different. So not a big deal whatsoever. And this is my little paint palette here. And all this other paint except for that blue paint is dry, so ignore that. I'm going to start on the eyes, and I'm going to paint the ridge here, both of the ridges, the blue. And also I am painting the inside rim of the eye cutouts. This is probably going to take 2 coats, I imagine, before that white does not show through. Alright, got those eyes painted. Yeah, I think I kind of like the that darker blue. I think that's going to work out well. You could probably see that there is still some white shining through. So I'm going to go back over, once it dries, I'll go back over and hit it again. But I don't want it just to be flat like that. I'll show you on this pumpkin right here. you can tell where I have dry brushed around the areas here, his eyes and his mouth on this guy. I'm going to do the same on this. And I have this round brush here, and it kind of, what I did was I trimmed it with a pair of scissors, trimmed it off. Something like this is really good for just going in and kind of dabbing. You can pick up the paint that's already on there, just like that, right along the edges, and pull it up. So kind of like a dabbing motion almost, and just pulling it away a bit from the paint. And you can make that as dramatic looking as you want, or not do it at all. I like this effect on these. You know, he's supposed to be an evil kind of a clown jack-o'-lantern, and I think this just gives it a little more interest. Or this other eye, same way. I'm just pulling away some of the paint from the edge. All right, something like that. Next up, I'm going to go ahead and get the nose painted. Nothing special. This is just a candy apple red that I'm using for the nose. Probably going to have to go over that twice as well, so I'll let it dry and then I'll go back over it. Alright, next up I'm going to do the mouth. All this area. I'm going to try not to get so much paint on the teeth. Eventually, I know it's going to happen, but I'm going to try not to get so much paint on the teeth. And again, I'm going to use this spice berry colored paint. I like this color for these evil or killer clown jack-o'-lanterns for the mouth, because it just has that more of a blood red look to it. I am going to get in between the teeth. Probably go in and do that with a smaller brush. So you will need various sizes of brushes for this. These smaller areas that are kind of hard to get in between the teeth. Now, I haven't completed all of it, obviously, but before this starts to dry around here, I'm going to do the same thing that I did with the eyes, and just pulling some of that color up and kind of like just smearing it a little bit. Dabbing, smearing, making it look bloody, really. Alright, let's take a look here. Something like that. Yeah. Alright, I think that looks pretty good. I'm going to go ahead and fill in the rest of these areas, or paint in the rest of his gum line and get in between the teeth there. I use a small paintbrush, about like that. A little thinner actually than that. And I got in between the teeth with that small paintbrush and back there a little bit as best as I could. I did end up getting some paint on some of the teeth, but that's not going to be a big deal, because I am going to paint the teeth to make them look pretty stained and gnarly looking. But so far, I'm liking the way he looks. I'm going to let this dry before I do anything else, because I don't want to make the mistake of touching it and then getting paint everywhere else. But once the mouth dries, the nose dries, the eyes here dry, I'm going to go back and I'm going to paint them again. I'm not going to smear more paint around the eyes. I think that looks fine, but I'm just going to paint over those areas again, because I do see a lot of the white primer still showing through, and I don't want that. So that's what I'll do next, but I'm going to let this dry so that I don't accidentally mess anything up. And then after I go in and do all that, I'm going to start on actually painting the pumpkin form itself. So that's up next. Alright, I painted back over, went over the red on the nose, the spiced berry crimson type colored red on the mouth, and then painted over again the navy blue around the eyes. Still a little bit tacky, but I'm going to try to be very careful and not touching it and spreading all that paint around, ruining my paint job. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to start on the back here now. And I have some nutmeg brown, and I have a pumpkin orange. So first thing that I want to do is I want to bring out these ridges, make these ridge lines here stand out a little bit more. So first thing that I'm going to do is I'm going to go in with some of the nutmeg brown paint. And I'm just going to paint in go all the way down, paint in between those ridges. I will paint the bottom as well, but right now I'm just really concentrating on the pumpkin form here, making it look like a pumpkin. While that's still wet, I'm going to go in with my pumpkin orange. As you can see, it's very bright, but it's going to pick up some of that nutmeg brown paint and make it a little bit darker. In fact, what I'm doing is I'm painting over the nutmeg brown with some of the orange paint. Get creative in your painting. This is just what I do. Doesn't necessarily mean that it's 100% correct or right. It doesn't have to be. It's perfectly fine. But if you have another way of painting, you're probably a better painter than I am, for sure. Use that method. You know, don't fix what isn't broken. I still need to paint in this area here, so I'm going to take a little bit more of my nutmeg brown paint. And then back to my pumpkin orange. And once this is dry and I'm happy with it, I'm going to go back in with the white paint and I'm going to clean up around these areas. Give it a definition of the clown face. Because I pulled this paint down too much. I don't want that up, down as low. I'm going to go maybe that. Something like that right in there. So I'm going to clean all that up. But it is looking pretty good. We are pretty much in the home stretch. I'm going to let this dry completely. And then take a look at it. See if I want to add any more paint. If I want to muddy it a little bit, add a little bit more brown in some of the areas, like some of these indentations in my clay, I might add a little bit more brown in there, but I don't want to keep messing with it while it's wet, because when it dries, it's going to look, the paint is not going to look like it looks now when it's wet. And I'm just using, this is Apple Barrel brand paint. It's acrylic craft paint. Dries really quick because it's acrylic, and it's cheap, and that's really all you need for this. You don't need any kind of expensive paint. You can use latex paint if you want, but for this, majority of the stuff that I paint, I use acrylic paint because of the drying time. All right. Let that dry and I'll get back to it. All right, as you can see, I finished up the paint. I didn't really feel like I needed to show that on camera. Like I said before, I cleaned up my lines here that basically define the pumpkin as opposed to the clown face. Clean that all up. After that was dry, I painted the bottom of the pumpkin orange, and I painted the teeth. So the color that I used to paint the teeth, and I don't know why, but I do like this color for crazy clown gnarly looking teeth, is called Golden Sunset. There's some orange paint that's smeared over it, but this is Golden Sunset. That's the color for these teeth. After that was dry, I went up here and I just painted over the stem again with the nutmeg brown. And so this thing is done. Now what I need to do is take it upstairs to my upstairs outside little deck area. And I'm going to spray this thing with the polyurethane. And again, I'm using this polyurethane. This is Minwax Clear Satin. I'm going to spray it. I'm going to spray the inside a little bit, and I'm going to spray the outside. The reason that I'm going to spray the inside as well as the outside is because if I ever plan on putting this thing outdoors, and if it happens to rain a little bit or anything like that, I won't have to worry so much about it being damaged, any kind of way like that. It'll protect it. That's what I'm trying to say. I mean, it's not gonna, if I left it out there in a snowstorm or rainstorm, obviously, because we have these open elements here, these open areas, and it is hollow, it will be open to rain and water, anything like that. So that's why I want to spray the inside as well. It will protect it a little bit from weather. Now, if you're not planning on using your sculpture outside, I still suggest that you spray it and seal it with the polyurethane. And the reason for that is because it's going to make the colors on this pop. It's really going to bring out the colors. And because I've used different types of paint, this is a little bit more glossy, even though it is an acrylic. Looks a little bit more glossy. So does this. The eye paint around here looks flat. And so does this pumpkin orange paint, and the brown paint that I've used looks flat. But once I spray the entire thing with the polyurethane, it's going to bring out all the colors, and it will protect it. Even though, if you're planning on keeping it indoors only, I would still spray it just for that reason alone. Plus, over time, things get dusty. And if this wasn't sealed and it got dusty, I wouldn't be able to take a lightly damp rag and, remove the dust from it. But being sealed, if it gets dusty, I can easily take a lightly damp rag and remove the dust from it. So that's a twofold reason on why you should use a sealer such as the clear satin polyurethane, even if you're planning on keeping this indoors only. So anyway, let's go. We're gonna go upstairs to my house, my outside upstairs deck. I'm gonna spray this thing, and then I'm gonna light it up from the inside. I'm gonna wait for it to get a little darker, of course, and then I'm gonna light it up from the inside. I'll show you what I'm gonna use for a light inside of this thing. All right, so I have these are styrofoam tubes here, and they have an LED multicolored light inside of them. Somebody gave me a bunch of these things at one point, and you can pick these up at like party favor type stores for, party gadgets, things like that. What's popular around where I live is a place called Party City, and they sell these things. You can probably get them online. But I don't know how well you can, they have different settings. You can make the lights flash slower or faster. I don't know how well you can see that through the camera, but I'm actually going to take that light mechanism out, and I'm going to insert it into both of these pumpkins and show you what they look like as soon as it gets dark. But first things first, I'm going to go up there and I'm going to seal this guy. It's quite windy up there. It was raining a little bit today, but it has cleared, so I'm hoping that it'll stay clear even though it is windy, and I can get this done. Alright, so I sprayed the polyurethane inside the pumpkin, outside the pumpkin, and I sprayed the bottom of it, which I didn't show you guys. But as I'm hoping you can see, it really brings out more of the color on these things when you do spray it with the polyurethane. And I use the satin If you want it more glossy, then use a gloss. And I have the 2 different variations of the Killer Clown Jack-o'-lantern sculptures. I didn't really focus so much on the basic pumpkin shape because I figured that was kind of a no-brainer if you've done this before. My main focus was creating the oblong pumpkin shape here for him and showing you guys that. And again, I need to give a shout out to Jay Olson of Unhinged Productions, because that's where I learned this technique on how to make the oblong pumpkin. I mentioned that in the first segment of this tutorial. So find him on YouTube. He's got a lot of great stuff. Yeah, so now I'm just waiting for it to get a little bit darker outside so I could put the lights inside of them and show you guys what that looks like. So here we are. It's about, I don't know, dusk. I didn't want it to be completely dark out because I wanted to still show you what the pumpkins, the jack-o'-lanterns, killer clowns look like. But that's the strobe light effect and those little tube lights that I dismantled and stuck inside there. In the video here, I'm mostly picking up red, but to my naked eye, there's greens, reds, blues. It has a really cool, like, carnival weirdness effect to it. Anyway, there you have it. Thanks for sticking with me on this tutorial. And if you haven't already subscribed, please consider subscribing. Next tutorial coming up is paper mache bats. Yeah. Because what's Halloween without some bats? Catch you on the next one. Thanks for watching.